Hey guys, George Mesa, Third Eye Edify podcast here, and I cannot be more excited to have this incredible guest on. He's a man of the world. He's got tons of content. If you haven't heard of him, go check him out at the InnerVerse podcast. This is Chance Garton. He is as I wrote on the screen here, wordsmith extraordinaire and so much more. His show has opening eyes left and right. Inspirational is an understatement. And we're here to talk about some of the things that he's been studying more lately that I think you'll all be very interested in. And it kind of overlaps with things I talk about here. But I think I'll let it take it from here. Chance, introduce yourself to my audience, please, and tell them a little bit about what you do and where they can find you.
Beautiful, George. I'm super glad to be here with you today. I love what you're doing. Hugely exciting for Third Eye Edify to be not only launched, but cruising. You're at cruising speed now.
Thanks, man.
Doing great. People can find me at InnerVersePodcast.com. My show is called the same thing, InnerVerse Podcast. I also have a Wednesday show that is a live show called Vibrant. George has been a frequent regular over there and will continue to be one, George willing.
Certainly.
So yeah, that's what I do. I'm a researcher. You called me a wordsmith extraordinaire. I am fascinated with language. And as Gabriel, our co-conspirator over there on Vibrant, aka Slick Dissident, has coined a phrase that is incredibly accurate. Philology is lockpicking.
Wow.
And philology it literally means philologos, the love of logos, the love of language, of logic, of words. And in terms of like the kind of contemporary meaning of the word philology, it just has to do with studying language. It's similar to etymology, but I don't know what you might say the difference between philology and etymology is, except that philology perhaps allows for a little bit more of what would seem like a stretch and cross-cultural comparison than etymology, where sometimes it's looked at as more rigid. But as Godfrey Higgins talks about in the book Anacalypsis from mid 1800s, early 1800s, incredible tome. Teach you everything you need to know right there about mythology and language. But he says that, to deny the value in etymology and to say, oh, that's a stretch, or, oh, you can't just swap a letter there and change the word and say that it's the same thing. But yet, translations of all holy books and scriptures and, ancient writings of any sort, any translation from an old language, especially a dead one, into a modern language where you're transferring idioms, you're looking at, you're making assertions about like the intent behind the words to try to create that same meaning in the language you're translating to. That is, in many cases, way more of a stretch than etymology. And yet the, accepted translations are, they're taken for gospel. So
right.
There's that. Right. Philology is lockpicking. And we're going to, I don't know what full length and breadth of the, the scope of things I've been thinking about we'll be able to discuss today. I don't know how much specific gravy we'll get into in terms of like, cross mythological comparisons and all that. But I do have kind of a train of thought to take us through that I've been working on for a couple of weeks here. It's a combination of thoughts that are older and then some more recent insights, and we can kind of start from the beginning. But yeah, I don't know, I'm supposed to be introducing myself. I'm a podcast host. I balance people's energy fields using sound, helping people to find coherence in their own emotional state and synchronicity with their inner outer world experience, relationship help. Really, there's like very little in the category of the good, true, and beautiful that you can't improve and accentuate the good, the true, and the beautiful through the process of energy healing. I call it energy healing. There's so many, that's just a catch-all phrase, but really what we're doing is helping people find the limiting beliefs about themselves and about the world that they're holding on to and they don't know that they're holding on to, that actually constitute a whirlpool vortex of stagnant and stuck energy that is actually in their container, like a little mini me that is, taking some of the taking some percentage of their overall energetic capacity and holding it back, and they don't necessarily know they're doing it. So anybody can benefit from tuning. Always an incredible experience, always a lot of fun. People can get in touch with me through my website or find the sound healing tab under like the shop tab, I think. I don't know. You poke around my website, you will find sound healing, and then there will be videos and some write-up explanation of how the process works, how you can get in touch with me to do that. And I'd love to do some more sessions. I've got a fairly open calendar for that at the moment, which I don't mind. I mean, that's just more time to write and research and prepare other things. So
for sure.
Yeah, I kind of have my hand in a lot of stuff. I've always been that way. Really into like starting new things and keeping the momentum on the old things that I have going by, streamlining and simplifying, maximum efficiency and all that. So yeah, life's been really good for me. I'm really excited to get into this conversation. And yeah, George, I'll kick it back to you.
Cool. Yeah, that's wonderful to hear all that. And really, the idea of, energy balancing, sound healing, biofield tuning, it really is, it's almost an essence of the things that we're about to discuss, because when you hear a word, it can take you somewhere that it's not supposed to very easily, just by the nature of how it sounds. And maybe we can just talk about one or two words in particular that I kind of set aside here, because before we get into, the deep dive, maybe we can just pick apart some things that I don't think our audiences are really necessarily blind to it, but it's good to mention them, because certain words come up and again, they sound a certain way. And before you ever really look into what it is or understand it, it affects you in a certain way. And then you can perceive it negatively as opposed to positively, or vice versa. It happens so often in our language, especially. And I was thinking, as I was trying to write a few things up here, I was thinking about our first episode, the first episode that I was on of your show, which was almost 2 years ago now. And we were discussing video games in culture, but we got to the point where I was saying the English language, it's just been handed to us as this thing that it's just taken over. It's everywhere. And it has so many issues with how it's made, how it's presented, how it's spelled even. And it just brings us right back to this, which I'm very excited about almost 2 years later now. So why don't we just, again, pick apart a few words. I got a few written down here. Let's start with this one, because it tends to be, it's misinterpreted quite often until you finally look into it. And that is the word occult, because I almost enter a negative space when I hear it sometimes, because growing up, the word cult was so ingrained as this unbelievably negative thing. Whether it is or not, I don't even care about that. But having a word inside of a word, not understanding what it really means, and take it from there. What does occult really mean? And why is it so easily misinterpreted? And how is it used in news and media against us to help us think a certain way about certain things?
Oh boy. The occult.
Oh,
dun,
man.
dun, dun.
Yeah, exactly.
So people may be familiar with the definition the word coming from the Latin occultus. And supposedly the etymology of that is from ob and cello or cello, which is to conceal. Basically, we're talking about, think about the word oculus. That refers to an eye. So the occult is that which is hidden from the eye, or hidden from understanding, invisible, secret, unknown, undiscovered, undetected. The occult qualities of reality or of matter. And then there's occult sciences that you would call magic, necromancy, ley lines, things that are scarcely visible, but maybe they are evident if you have an understanding of the flow of chi in the environment. You might be able to say, okay, there are occult lines here flowing from point A to point B. So the occult, in terms of how that phrase is presented to the public, we are in an age where all of the possible benefit of studying the occult, and that applies to so many things. I mean, what can you look at that doesn't have a hidden quality? I mean, the very nature of the dualism that we find ourselves in. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but that, things have a front, back, left, right, up, down, and you can only ever see 180 degrees at any one point, and even kind of less than that. That's your whole peripheral vision. So no matter what you're looking at in life, there's always going to be something about it that's occulted. Like I'm looking at my mug in front of me, and the back side of the mug is occulted.
Right.
So I'm going to
planets do
research
it too,
the occult
right?
and turn it around and see that, yes, it looks the same as the front.
Right. And they call it occulting when the planets go in front of each other, and you don't, or if Mercury travels in front of the sun, that's a transit, but the planets can occult each other as well. That's the same terminology for that kind of thing too.
Yes. So with the occult, it is often conflated with evil. It must be evil.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a good reason for that, because I'm not saying that the occult is evil. By nature, things that are hidden are not necessarily or guaranteed evil, but things that are evil or deceptive do like to hide. I mean, that's what deceptive is. So,
very true.
I see why there's sort of an instinct about the occult that, oh, that's naughty, that is evil. Because the history of occultism in general is the attempt many times, like with the word magic or necromancy, it's the attempt to do something in a sneaky way to make something happen, utilizing the unseen or the hidden forces that the occultist is aware of. But if I had to define really what the occult constitutes in the big picture of our world, I think the occult is, in terms of the hidden stream of knowledge or wisdom that has been used to wield a power differential, from the masters to the slaves of the world, is the full breadth of the knowledge that humans have managed to accumulate of psychology, the psyche meaning soul, and the occult psychology, as opposed to the psychiatry, psychology of the modern age, is fully aware of and inundated with the knowledge that the psyche of man, the psychology of us as beings, is actually in an as above, so below, as within, so without way. It is the psychology of the cosmos. So studying the occult, it also constitutes studying human psychology, universal. You could just call the occult universal psychology. And that knowledge, of course, would provide a power differential if you understood the mechanics of how people's minds work and could manipulate them. But all that being said, it can come across like I'm saying, like, oh, there's boogeymen out there that know how your mind works so well that they can make you do things with, against your free will. And that is a lie. So that, in my maybe difference between other conspiracy researchers, or who you might call conspiracy researchers, and myself, is that my most deeply held conspiracy theory is that nobody's in charge. Maybe there's like some mafias fighting for power and some gang warfare, but I'm not saying that doesn't happen and that people don't attempt to manipulate each other, cheat each other, steal from each other, kill each other, whatever. But I think that it is deeper than that. I think one of the most profoundly occulted awarenesses that humanity has chosen to hide from themselves out of a fear of their own power and the responsibility thus, derived from that power, that is the belief. We've been holding on to this belief that something can make us do something against our will, that forces can be wielded against us that we don't understand, and then we don't have a say in the matter. And so to me, like, the most deeply occulted truth of the reality is that nobody is in charge. You have full 100% capacity to exercise your free will. And really, whatever you wish for, you will get.
That's right. That's right. The secret might have not been the best approach back in the late 90s, early 2000s, but the concept was correct, In
a sense, yeah. I mean, I'm not really that familiar with The Secret, but I see the cultish mentality around it and the materialism around it. And that's not attractive to me. But at the end of the day, I think the lesson from the excellent novel, chock full of occultism, actually, is The Never-Ending Story. And the lesson that I took away from that book was that you always get what you wish for. But if you wish for things that are against your true self, your true nature, who you really are, who you came here to be, you will get those things, but in the getting of those things, you will trade knowledge of who you are. You will begin to hide from yourself who you really are. That's what happens to the main character. He starts wishing for all kinds of things, but each time he's wishing for something that is not, for his highest good and the highest good of the all, which is who we really are. We're all the all, everything is everything. Then he begins to forget who he is and where he came from more and more, to the point where, he's basically becoming all powerful, but has no idea who he is. I think that's an amazing metaphor.
Yeah, no, I agree. And a lot of our viewers might not know how different that book is from the movie if they've seen the movie. So we suggest it's not very long, actually. So we suggest that you do read it. And
you'll be glad you did.
Yeah, you'll be.
It's not just a kid's book.
No, definitely not. And I think that tends to align something with the Nordic tradition, maybe the Poetic Edda or something. I forgot which one it was, but it says very specifically, don't trade lies for money. And in other words, don't do something that, don't pretend to be happy about doing something just because you're getting paid, which I see nothing but that lately, especially in our culture. And it's too bad.
Yeah, honor is a real thing, man.
That's right.
Honor and honesty, there's a reason they are phonetically similar words. I mean, the simplest way to be in honor is to be honest.
Right. There it is. And there it is. Keeps coming right back to the language. They're almost the same word.
Exactly,
man. Oh, that's beautiful. And, to end with the occult topic, I mean, the things that we've been reading lately, the things people in our circle end up reading are, unfortunately, they tend to be translations if they're older. And that's a way to occult things too. So we have to be very careful about the translations. And there's so much. I mean, if things rhyme in a translation, then the translation's wrong, for example. It's just something to be on the lookout for when you study these things.
Probably. There's exceptions to the rule, but you're probably right. You're pretty right about that, I'm sure.
Sure, yeah. I agree. It can't be every time. No, but if it rhymes perfectly in English.
About Greek words,
right.
You being a Greek, Greek, whatever you are.
Oh yeah, we got a little Colombian action, Colombian Greek.
Yeah, so, and I have recently gotten decently fluent in at least the phonetics of Greek, so I can read the Greek alphabet. And I'm not like grammatically fluent in Greek, but I come across sentences in Greek and in a book like Anacalypsis right here, and I can at least say it out loud. And then if I hear what it sounds like, it gives me a good idea of what we're looking at.
Right. And sound is part of the language. As we speak, we say and speak the way that we want to. We use cadences as we speak. We speak a certain way. There's a tone to it. There's a rhythm to it. And maybe that'd be a cool word to kind of talk about too, rhythm, now that we're talking about it, because that's one of those words that it's not like the occult where it's a misjudged and often kind of used against us sort of word to keep us away from things perhaps. But trying to, and I have so many music students over the decades, I always ask them this once they start getting pretty good. I'm like, okay, what is rhythm? Can you even define this word? And it's a very difficult word to truly define. Everyone has their own sort of way of doing it. I have 5 different music dictionaries. They're all completely different definitions, actually. And I'm not exaggerating. They're really different. And one of them in particular is, 3-page definition. Not 3 separate ways to define it, but 3 pages of definition on this very strangely jumbled up word with a bunch of consonances at the end. And the rhythm of life in general is an important thing. And that's one of those words that it could mean different things in different contexts. But just getting the juices flowing on words and stuff is that it's one of those words that you know what it is. Everyone gets it, but try defining it. It's a very weird word to define. It really is.
Yeah, I just did a little kind of poking around on my Webster's 1828 dictionary for that. Nice. But yeah, we're talking about having proportion of sound, or one sound proportioned to another, harmonical, duly regulated by cadences, accents, and qualities, or quantities, not qualities. Right. So it's math. Rhythm has
right.
It's simplified. It's like sound and math put together. Definitely makes one think of that idea of the quadrivium, how to really comprehend the universe you find yourself in. Arithmetic, which is number, is necessary, and then geometry, which is space, and then music, which is time, and then astronomy or astrology, which combines all of those aspects together. And if you have a working understanding of those 4 principles, you can see how they, that gives you all the dimensionality of the experience of the world. And I want to throw something else out there about the word occult.
Sure, absolutely.
Part of the scariness of that word to people is partly due to a completely erroneous belief in the idea that the truth can be concealed.
Very good point.
But on a purely philosophical level, what do we mean when we say truth? We're talking about that which exists, that which is real, reality, capital R. Well, the beautiful thing about reality and existence is it is the only thing that exists. So I truly think that, especially if you open yourself up to this knowing,
right,
that then you will be able to take advantage of it, that the truth is always present and evident in your environment and in your inner world at all times. But what holds you back from it is the maybe belief that it's not there, or that you can't find it, or more commonly, more importantly, that you are self-deceiving. And so you're hiding the truth from yourself, but it's always there. It's always ready to be seen. The things we might be talking about today with the technology of language and the true nature of mythologies and religions and the Messiah, as I like to call it.
Right.
That the truth of all that is right in our face, right under our nose. But we need philology to pick the lock, as Gabe says. So that's
you're right. It makes me think of why there's a globe in every classroom right next to several maps that don't look anything like that globe. And it starts from a very young age, and the emperor's new clothing said it best. Everyone wanted to see how dumb their neighbors were, so they just didn't want to say anything. But that little kid said something because truth was evident to him. And he's the only one that was willing. Yeah, it's always there. And that story tells it all, man. It's an incredible work.
Yeah, that's also the beauty of truth, is that you can kind of rule things out. If they aren't self-evident, you don't need to accept it as truth.
Right.
The words of course, self-evident are, that's an amazing phrase. Just, put that into your mental toolkit and work with that which is self-evident, and you'll simplify a lot for yourself.
Right. And, when people say, oh, these coincidences are unreal, like maybe that's the whole point. If they're connecting, if they're working, everything should be making sense once you start putting things together. And not theories, of course, not ancient theories that have not been proven, but self-evident. I like that. That's a great way to tail that off for sure, man. That's great.
So I want to take us through a bit of a story, not a narrative story, but I want to take us back to circa 2012, 2011.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess 2010 is where it is all beginning for me. I'm in college. I'm a film minor. I'm a creative writing major. And, I had a little bit of you've seen probably some of my work with, Gabriel and Gordy on the Marvelous Demystifiers, where we're breaking down the symbolism in superhero movies.
Definitely.
Well, that kind of began a long time ago for me. I was in a composition class as a sophomore, and instead of reading novels and literature, we were reading the teacher had us reading graphic novels, which was pretty much my first exposure to all that. And I was really impressed. I really liked the medium, but I didn't get into comics yet. But I did start to get the idea of the visual language of comics. There is a language to it, and we'll talk about this visual language and composition language in a second. But
sure.
What happened a little while later was I stumbled across an issue called Ultimate Spider-Man number 42. And it was in my roommate's possession, who I was living with at the time. I read the book and I'm like, whoa, I was really hooked. I was really into it. I mean, back then I was a super big gamer, full on taking the path that was offered and through life of work and, work 8 hours, entertain yourself 8 hours, sleep 8 hours. And for me, it was entertain myself 10 or 12 hours, work 4 hours, sleep 2 hours. I don't know what the math is on that, but but okay. So like what hooked me about this Ultimate Spider-Man number 42 was he had this interaction with some of the X-Men, and they were different than the X-Men that I remembered. They were slightly different. And I looked into it, like started Googling about Ultimate Spider-Man, and I found out, okay, so the Ultimate Comics title that Marvel had been putting out was a separate and parallel universe to the Marvel Comics universe.
Right.
And I promise I'm going somewhere with this. I'm not just talking about comics for the audience, not for you. I know you're cool, but you know, and you know, what had kept me from collecting comics or reading them in the past was how like I couldn't wrap my arms around it. You had decades and decades of issues and it seemed all complicated, and like, where do you start and how can you actually know it all? And I like, you know, I have this, maybe it's a masculine drive to collect and categorize and organize collections. You know what I mean?
I sure do, man.
So I couldn't do that. But when I realized that the Ultimate Comics was something that had launched in 2000 or 2001, and it had rebooted or restarted the story of Spider-Man, the story of other superheroes. There's Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate Avengers, etc. And I was like, this is great. I could actually collect all of these issues, and I could actually have, you know, I could have a knowledge of the full breadth and scope of this storyline in this other universe. That is and what's appealing about that in comics in general is it's like a huge collaborative, you know, other world. Many writers, many artists are working together to create this immersive experience where one story connects to another. And, you know, so the Ultimate Universe was more well put together, where you could, there were fewer authors and it hadn't been going on as long. So it was like more synced up with itself. And I really liked that. Over the next couple of years, I ended up collecting the entire Ultimate Universe of comics,
right,
which I still have boxes of. But that also turned into like buying other comics and spending way too much money on comics back then. Didn't have anything else to spend my money on. Should have been saving it. But, you know, what is important about this, though? Why am I talking about this? It's because the superheroes are like the gods and heroes of religion. Okay. And this is not really disputable. I think this is a fact. You can read The Gods Wear Spandex by Christopher Knowles from 2007. Great book that will shed some light onto the topic if that's interesting to you. But what has occurred to me now and recently is that the reason for new religions that crop up, new mythologies, new stories, is because the very same thing that we see today with comic books, that whenever the story had been going on for a long time, the tradition's getting long in the tooth and old and all that, people get less and less keen to jump in. And, you know, it's too big. It's like, it's too much. I'm not going to start because the mountain is too tall.
Right.
So what happens? You get Hollywood movie reboots over and over again. How many times has the origin story of Batman or Spider-Man been told on screen?
Yep.
So realizing this, I was like, okay, this is exactly what Christianity did. Christianity took all of the mystery traditions of, you know, east to west and made a reboot of the Messiah story. And this realization was kind of big because it was like, not only are superheroes like the gods and demigods and heroes of mythology, but if they are like those gods, that means the gods, the heroes, the demigods are like superheroes. It goes both ways. And then all of a sudden a lot clicked. I was like, oh shit, we're dealing with, in terms of the scribe class, the priest class, the idlers who figured out how to tell stories so well that they could get other people to do their work for them and bring them food and give them offerings and shit.
Right.
They were literally like me and Gabe and Gordy sitting around and demystifying Marvel. They were big nerds who were super into superhero stories and figured out a way to turn that into a career. Just like there are people today who make superhero movies or do a superhero podcast and they have tons of listeners and they're just talking about the stories endlessly.
Yep.
So that's a big thing. That was a big thing to realize, that these are these are reboots. These religions are reboots of an ancient literary tradition. So I start pulling on the thread. I want to go back to what's the root of this literary tradition. And, before we get there, let's talk a little bit about roots. Or, I'll give you some space to comment on everything I just said, because otherwise I'll just go.
No, it's fine. You're here. This is why you're here, man. It's great.
Oh, okay. So, like, what is radical, right? Because a lot of what we see in the world is labeled radical, radical fundamentalists, radical terrorists, yada, yada, yada. So I looked back and I was like, what's the origin of radical? It comes from the Latin word radix, which means root, R-A-D-I-X. And that was interesting to me because, something pertaining or fundamental pertaining to the root is, if you realize that the X, or this is just an example of how X can become SH.
Right.
Because radix, a radish is a radix. A radish is a root vegetable.
Pull it out of the ground and eat that part. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, funny enough, the modern definition in the Merriam-Webster dictionary of radical is not pertaining to or inherent to the root or a root.
Right.
They say in Merriam-Webster, the definition of radical is somebody who wants to dramatically change or move away from tradition or established modes. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know exactly what the definition is. I'm not looking at it, but
what year is yours?
Oh, I'm just going off of the Google search top result, Merriam-Webster dictionary for radical.
Oh, okay.
And that's an example of how language gets shifted, definitions get changed. So now you can call people radical terrorists, and at the same time, it's almost like a cult mockery that the truth is most of the people who you're calling radicals or a radical fundamentalist, if you're saying radical means you don't want to follow tradition, but a fundamentalist is traditional.
Traditional, yeah, of course. They do that all the time, though. That up-down thing. It's just too.
Well, and then that's been the case for the cooties era. They change the definitions of words all the time.
Oh, yeah.
The one of the biggest jokes was changing the definition of herd immunity to have to do with people getting their cowpokes, which I call such because vaca is a Latin word meaning cow. Your herd immunity. It's all a joke.
It is.
In Sanskrit, the word for a root is mula or muli. And I thought that's an interesting one. Yeah. Because between Latin to Sanskrit to Latin, the W, the M becomes a W. Okay. So, the muli or the mula becomes woolly.
Right.
And I was like, okay, we're right on the moolah here with talking about roots, because if something is, we're talking about the root, the origin, the tradition, and the idea of woolly or fleecy has to do with the ram, the Most High, the Lamb of God. And like an example would be an old tradition with deep roots, the Sufis. The word Sufi is referring to wool, as in like they wear woolen clothing. Right. And it's also Sophie or Sophis, wisdom, right? Like the Greek Sophia, word pertaining to wisdom.
Right. Philosophia.
Yeah. And also Sufi is referring to, with this idea of woolliness or fleeciness, the radiance, there's your RAD again, right? The radical root, the radiance of the sun is creating, this effect of making the fleecy or woolly clouds around it glow and all that. And this is important because we're talking about, the ancient roots of this system. One of the most ancient versions of the universal mythology system is Buddhism, and Buddha is always depicted with curly, fleecy hair, which I believe is probably a symbolic reference to the woolly, fleecy clouds that the sun is riding with. Anyway, so Sufis are like, Sufi is encoding all that. Wooly, mooly. That's how I got there.
That's cool, man.
And,
That's
and
real
then more interplay between Latin and Sanskrit would be how in Sanskrit, the god of fire is Agni, and the Latin word for fire is Igni.
Right.
And the Catholic name for the word for the Lamb of God is Agnus Dei. Agnus Dei. So, it's not openly asserted by linguists or whoever is the expert, whoever they are.
Yeah.
It's not
the
asserted,
diploma experts, right?
Yeah, it's not asserted that the word Agni means a lamb or a ram. It's asserted that word just means the god of fire or fire. Right. And also apparently there's no connection to Igni. Yet Agni rides on a chariot pulled by rams.
Yep.
You know who else does? Wow. You know who else rides on a chariot pulled by rams or goats? Thor.
Oh, Thor.
Yeah. Well, put Thor backwards. If you put Thor backwards, we're back to root.
Right.
Or rot.
Rotus. Yeah.
So all of these connections, you can see them if you start to pick the locks of philology, right?
Definitely. And in Greek, it's arni or arnaki, I think, is lamb or like a cute lamb. So it's there too. It's everywhere.
So knowing
you're not going to find it.
Knowing all this, then we need to understand that, like when we're talking about either Igni or Agni or Agnes, these words don't mean just the one thing that they're purported to mean in the one language. Right. Igni is also referring to not just fire, but also a lamb, also to purity, also to fire, all of these things like relating to the sacrifice of the lamb or the ram. And, so this philology, changing the A to the I, Agni to Igni, these things might seem to the, I would say uninitiated. I'm not initiated by anybody else, but like those who have unbegun, maybe that's a better word.
Unbegun, we'll use that.
Yeah. The unbegun might think like, oh, you can't just switch vowels willy-nilly. But I'm here to tell you, you can change vowels, any vowel to any other vowel at any other time.
That's right.
And all you need to know to be aware of that is like, think about how people in one part of your country say a word, and especially vowels versus another part of the country. What really hit home for me when I first heard a New Zealander talking and they said the word omega. And, here in my Midwestern standard American English accent, right. Omega. But the New Zealander was saying Omega. Right. And I was like, that's it. Okay. You can just change any vowel to any other vowel because that's what happens between dialects and regions. And if you go back into the history of the language we're speaking right now, English, there was a long stretch of time where there was no standard spelling.
Right.
The whole diction of Aries concept is rather new, actually, which is why I like to go back to the Webster's 1828, because that's not far off from the beginning of there ever being such a thing as dictionaries to begin with. I'm not saying there weren't dictionaries further in the past, but for the most part, the idea of a dictionary, they were more referred to as a lexicon. And there are lexicons that have been unearthed from ancient Sumer that show you the Akkadian word for a Sumerian word, or the cuneiform abbreviation for Akkadian words. And so there's, there is some like one language to another dictionary, but those dictionaries were for a specific class or caste, the priest astronomers who were the, scribes and the keepers of written language. This technology of written language is not something, we take it so for granted, and we're inundated by it. I live in the billboard capital of the world.
Right.
So driving down the road or riding in the car as a kid, I'd always be like, man, it's crazy how these billboards are just everywhere. And as we pass by them, I can't help but the word on the billboard to enter my mind and my consciousness. I can't shut it out. It's just like boom, boom, boom. And
it casts a spell immediately.
Spelling right into my mind. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So there's a serious technology to language that is, I think that humanity is missing the boat on it. Like we're missing the origin of it. We don't understand.
It's intentionally occulted from us, And
how does it even happen that we get language? That's what I'm really curious about.
We
And
kind
that's
of
what I'm
discussed that when I was
exploring
on
right
your
now.
show last. We were talking about what came first, rhythm or melody with music. It's the same thing. You can't, it's impossible. And if someone says they know, I don't think they do. That's no one knows. And if someone does, it's ancient knowledge that we haven't seen yet. It could be somewhere though. It's hard to know. I mean, if you could somehow have a few humans, in a Lord of the Flies sort of thing where they're all alone on an island together for 10 years, what would come out of this, right? I don't think it would be super advanced, but they would probably draw before they put words on the page. Like, oh, I saw this the other day, and they would just mentally do it. It's so hard to know. But I wish I had an old dictionary as old as yours. I have a 1960.
Oh, I don't have a physical copy.
Okay. So you
offline.
can just look it online. That's
Just
great.
go to Webster's Dictionary, 1828.com. I know people might say like, it's grabbled. They can change the definitions. It's online. Yeah, that's fine. But like, nobody goes to this fucking thing. No, it's not that kind of like I've never caught him changing the definition from the Webster's 1828. This is like a great tool to tell you what things originally meant. Or you'll find fun little idiosyncrasies like, in 1828, there was no such word as matriarchal.
Yeah,
matriarchal.
I was just going to say that. The words that you think have been around for a long time are not, like coven. I found out coven is a very new word. I thought that was a pretty old word. It's not. And interestingly enough, at the beginning of
it's
these,
not in there.
It's not in there. Of course not. I think it started in like 1910 or something. I did a whole episode on it.
But there is COVIN.
Right.
In the Webster's or the old English dictionary here. And it says
exactly,
in law, a coven, COVIN, a collusive or deceitful agreement between two or more to prejudice a third person.
Right. Something negative, of course.
There's definitely
no
some
surprise there.
Covens going on right now.
Oh yeah. Coven, convention, all those words. What's beautiful is they have the symbols and language abbreviations for etymologies, and that's at the beginning of the older dictionaries. And I wish that more, you buy the new ones and they don't have these things, and they're pretty awesome. I wish that more of this existed, and that's a good reason to get old dictionaries, old encyclopedias. And you actually reminded me of one last thing with the Igni thing, is that if we're discussing a ram, if we're discussing Aries as the beginning of the zodiac, and Igni is to ignite, then that's kind of like the beginning of something. That's the start of something. So there's the relationships would be endless. We could talk about one word for 7 hours easily, and and have plenty more to go. It's really fascinating. And your angles and perspective now, I mean, your muscles are growing with this, man, fast. I've seen it happen as you're doing it during your shows. I've seen it. And maybe, I don't know if you meant it this way, but doing the Vibrant every week, and please, everyone, check this out every Wednesday night. It's a beautiful thing. You doing the Vibrant and being a little freer about it, where people can just kind of come and go as they, as they're invited, and you find things out, but you never thought you would, and the topic just blazes along. That probably has a factor here that's probably helpful in this regard. You're flexing those muscles even more than you normally would be. Where an episode's like a focused topic, you're just going. And I think that it's helping. I think it's helping everyone who watches too. And of course,
thank you for that.
Gabriel helps too. Of course, he's, oh man, having him on board is a beautiful thing, dude.
Oh yeah. I mean, I could do it without him, but I wouldn't want to.
Who would want that? It seems like, and Gabriel,
yeah, when are you having Gabe on Third Eye Edify?
Oh, I'm definitely gonna, man. I'm gonna try to figure a topic out.
There's
maybe
no more joyful a witness than Gabriel. Whatever mind-blowing thing you bring to him, he's just like, yes, my mind is as fully blown as yours, maybe more, and I'm gonna just shine all this enthusiasm at you, and you're gonna feel great.
Yep.
I mean, you might give him a run for his money on being a super helpful and positive witness, but that guy's really got it figured out.
I appreciate it. He's got more of the info locked in, that's for damn sure. Maybe I'll have him talk public versus private or something like that, because there's so much to discuss there, and I'm sure his knowledge is growing with that too.
He's real stretchy.
yeah. It's
but
incredible.
if you don't take any shots, you'll never make any goals.
That's right.
Got to take shots. So anyway, I brought up the whole idea of how saturated we are in language, and there is a phenomenon I found out about a couple of years ago that just like really put a piece in the puzzle right into place. How, the psychology of this has probably been known about for way longer than it was made public. But when human beings are exposed to information, there is a direct correlation where the more information is accessible to a human being, the less attention span they have, the less time they do stay focused on any one thing. So that is a huge piece of the puzzle with how saturated in language we are. We are externalizing our ability to pay attention by putting our attention into all these more and more expanding and myriad things. That's a really big thing, really big realization to hold on to. I think that also, like, this huge expansion of knowledge that is holding a lot of our attention hostage is prone to a civilization that has developed extreme abundance. That's naturally, I say naturally, but an outcome of that is people just begin to confuse or invert their priorities, right? Like, the knowledge of farming and things to survive is considered boring compared to literal cartoons, the cartoon reality offered by entertainment. In earlier times, the man of leisure and the man of letters were one and the same. Not only did they find enjoyment in the endless commentary and rewriting of their literary traditions, they seem to have continually sought to use the power of these stories to craft ever better versions, helpful for them to shape the minds of the non-literate laborers that the lettered men kept fettered in the religious belief of their cultural fiction. The many church fathers of early Holy Roman Empire admitted as much. There are quotations in their writings where they erroneously assumed that no one would ever be literate from the class that they had the boot on their neck below them, to find out that they said this. But I need to I have a note here in my notes to go grab some of these quotes specifically, but I've come across quotes from early church fathers that say specifically things like, I teach that these stories of our scriptures are true and literal histories, but I, for myself, consider them fables and will privately, publicly, I'll say that this is all the way, the truth, the life, man. But privately, I'm a philosopher to the end. So, it's just fascinating. It's fascinating how somehow we've been able to convince ourselves that the only value in these spiritual traditions is if they are literal history and actually 100% truly factual things that happened, when there's no such thing as history. There's only the present moment, and everything else is a story. Period. End of stop. There is no way to recreate the reality of the past through words. It cannot be done. You may accurately describe it or not, but even your own memory, you don't actually remember what happened. You remember the story that you told the last time that you told the story of what you think happened.
Right.
So just think about it this way. If we are needing things to be literal and historical, and we're lost in a delusion of mysticism, no different than scientism, where the guy in the black robe told you what the truth was and what you needed to believe to be saved, just like the guy in the white butcher's, doctor's lab coat tells you what you must believe to be saved.
Right.
Where's the value in that? Right. That, to me, there's no value in morality that is arbitrated by fake authority. The true value of morality is that it comes from within, that we all have a conscience. We all have a connection to the feeling of what is right and wrong. Right. We all know what is honor, what is honest, what is not. We have that built in. And to do something, to do the right and honorable thing because it's the right and honorable thing is the only right and honorable way to do the right and honorable thing. To do it out of fear of retribution or deference to the authority of man, all of that is no morality at all. It's no morality at all. So when we reframe the way we think about the ancient mythologies and religions, I'm not telling you to jettison them or that there's no value there. Think of all, again, back to people talking about comic books today and how much fun they have to write, pulling all the threads of every part of every story. Think of all the endless analysis, derivation of morality, idolization of characters, and all of that you can produce from in a single work of literature, even when there's no mystical belief in its historicity or its existence in reality. The Lord of the Rings comes to mind, right?
Yeah,
it is a fiction so well created with allegorical truth chock full of it that if it were the basis of a religion, many people would probably prefer it to the modern religions, myself included.
I would think so.
And that would be an example of a reboot.
Right.
I mean, just there's so much in Tolkien alone. Like maybe someday that will be a subject I go more deeply into, but that guy had the lockpick of philology. He had access to some shit, you know, and like the example
he recited his own poems in the language he invented. He would recite his own poems. You know, that's
and he would write
not a common thing.
A lot of his unpublished works were in like literally in meter and rhyme, like epic poetry of the past. The guy was on another level. Yeah, I'm still working on wrapping my head around that, but I found like just recently that Jesus Christ was called. Hold on, I'm gonna back. Hold that thought.
Got it.
I found in a line from the Midrash Koheleth, which is like commentary, or they call it gloss, like glossolalia, on the book of Ecclesiastes from like the 6th to 8th century, a long time ago. There's I found a line in there where the quote is, "It happened that a serpent bit Elisar ben Dama, and James, a man of the village, came to heal him in the name of Jesus ben Panther." So that's a side thread. Maybe we'll get into, maybe not. Really big can of worms there. Why was Jesus frequently referred to in the Hebraic text as Jesus ben Panther? Well, there's a great reason for that. But I just noticed that the serpent, the guy that got bit by a serpent, was Elisar. And Tolkien called Aragorn, the king, the once and future king, the Messiah Christ figure, his name to his own people was Elisar, which in Tolkien's Elvish language meant elf stone. And Zar or Sar means Lord and rock and stone and God. El is the Lord. El is basically, elf. All of that's there. So Tolkien was allegorizing very deep truths. And so like, what's important about that? Why I bring up that example, why I'm talking about, how we could make a religion out of the Lord of the Rings. I mean, another example that Dylan brought up. What is the name of the land in Lord of the Rings? It's Middle Earth. Right. Well, where did the ancient civilization flourish and the universal system seemingly, arise out of? The Mediterranean. Middle, Terra, Earth, Mediterranean, Middle Earth, he's absolutely, he's Tolkien. Yeah, like totally, it's that good, right? It's that good. And then even, you mentioned stone, that there's Petra, it's there too. There's several connections to make. It's pretty crazy. You mean like Peter Parker, the Rock, the Lord, Spider-Man, right? Parkouring wherever he wants. Who's Peter Parker's mom and dad? Well, he's got surrogate or foster family. Right. Aunt May, Maya, Mary, Maya or Maya, mother of Buddha, mother of Mercury, mother of Jesus, etc. It goes on. Even said to be the mother of John the Baptist, because they're the same guy. His actual identity is Orion up there. We're not even talking about astrotheology. No, we're not even there. Right. We're not even another wing of it. Like, that's where it all came from. And we're going to get there, actually. I'm going to circle this to astrotheology in a way that is like jaw-dropping, in my opinion. But anyway, like, if you made a new religion out of Lord of the Rings, the reason it would work is because it's the same conceptual truths packaged in a thing that is more palatable to the modern age and reduced, pared down to a size that people can get their arms around, right? And that's what I'm telling you. That's what all the religions of the world that have ever rose up and taken hold have always been: reboots. I agree. It's a reboot, rebranding. It's the same thing. It's all we see in all entertainment. So there's no reason to not at least make that correlation to somebody who was, unbegun, let's say,
at least see that nothing but remakes lately. And that should already tell you that there's a very strong thing about the idea of a remake where even Disney remakes their own stuff, they go from animation to live action, but it's still the same story. They keep wanting those stories right in your face at all times, no matter what. So clearly this seems very valid. It's very hard to argue against it.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get around to talking about why Jesus is Ben Panther, which I find fascinating.
You mentioned Bar Panther a lot as you were doing your thing lately on your show.
Yeah, and I was actually mixing it up. Bar and Ben mean the same thing.
Right,
but
right.
It's Jesus Ben Panther. A few points. Just why dance around it? Bacchus was raised by panthers.
Right.
Panthers are the pateres, the fathers. There's a lot more to it than that proves the identity of Jesus and Bacchus to be the same. But the point being that Bacchus was also raised by a foster, just like Peter Parker was raised by his uncle Ben. Ben,
right? Of course.
I mean, hell, even Parker can be Paul because R to L switch. Paul,
right.
Car, Care. It's the vessel of wisdom, the carrier of wisdom, the light bearer. Parker.
Right.
Peter,
wow.
The Lord, the rock, the God. And see, because and the question arises like, there are some tiny hats involved in the creation of Marvel, like almost exclusively tiny hats. Mm-hmm. That's a thing. I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody.
No,
I'm not making any accusations or whatever, but I actually do think that there is something about the human imagination that brings us this type of information in this structure and this language in a way that it's innate to us. So even if somebody is creating the story that doesn't understand everything I just talked about, or even very much of it, you're still going to get characters like Peter Parker, where the names and things all sync up to the Messiah mythos, the Messiah. Yeah. Why would that be?
No, there's too many correlations.
There's something about it, like whenever we do Marvelous Demystifiers and we're just pulling all this stuff out of it, like there's no way we're giving them way. If you were to believe that we're saying that the creators and the writers and the artists of the movies put all that stuff in there on purpose, we're giving them way too much credit. Way too much credit. They're just like, they're not on that level. I don't think. Maybe they are.
At this point now in the the trajectory of it, I'd say probably not. And they're just repeating what was already laid down.
Probably not. Yeah, but so
they have the budget. That's what they're bringing. They're bringing the budget.
The real value of any story is how well it can allegorize or represent truth. When you boil down the narrative into the metaphors that you can derive that explain natural processes and phenomenon. So what I mean by that is like, if you get any element of the hero's journey correct in a story, then naturally what will arise within that story are further and deeper allegories that accurately represent nature beyond the intention of the creator.
Right.
I think everybody's experienced this where they made something and people interpreted things in it that were there, but you never meant to put there.
Right.
That's because if you get the math right, the order of operations, the process in which nature does things, the hero's journey, the sky clock, the astrologos, the Enneagram, any of these tools that give you a slice, a perspective on how nature unfolds, then, and you build around that structure, things will arise in it that are true to that structure, true to that innate reality. That's super important for us to understand that. Like a lot of what we're pointing at and be like conspiracy.
Right.
I'm saying synchronicity. I mean, not that there aren't bad intentions and covens,
sure,
colluding, that's all very well and good, but okay. So I've made that point. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get to one of the biggest bombshells here, or try to work our way there.
Definitely.
In my opinion,
definitely.
Bombshell. All right. So where to start with this? All right. So we know language is a technology, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Technology. Simply put, technology itself, that's a loaded word, right? We associate it with tech, as in electronics and whatnot. But the original definition, or an older definition of technology, is a description of arts or a treatise on the arts. Technology. So
Wow.
an explanation of the terms of the arts. So
Right.
what are the terms of art? That has a whole nother rabbit hole, legalistically speaking.
Sure.
The terms of art of the law system, the terms of art of the medical system, and all that, and yada yada. But there are terms of art that are nature's terms of art. There are terms of art like, the beginning, middle, end, the mother, father, son, the progression of spring, summer, fall, winter. These are terms of art. So a technology that accurately describes these terms of art of nature. This going back to what I was just trying to hopefully elucidate. If you have the technology to describe the terms of art of the creator of all things, the self-existent, self-evident, eternal life force energy of that is reality, the animating spirit of all things, we're getting into what the original meaning of a term like Yad-He Vav-He would actually be. Hugely loaded tetragrammaton. That's a hugely loaded rabbit hole, totally misunderstood, but
definitely.
Oh, okay. I really want to get this out in a way that hopefully people resonate with, and it doesn't sound too crazy, but
go for it, man. You got this, man. Don't worry.
So I was trying to put myself back further and further in time, and understand what a world with less technology in terms of what we, this idea of a description of arts is completely different. So let's leave that aside. Going with the modern idea of technology, a tool that allows you to do something more easily, a convenience, etc. And a long time ago, it occurred to me how technology is always a plagiarization or externalization of an innate ability that we have in our consciousness or in our physical form, or etc. So whatever you can do with a technology, at least up to a certain point, it's quite evident that would have been doable through your own sheer force of being. And so I hope that follows. I hope people get it. The technology of a shovel, but you could also dig with your hands, right? That's a simple machine.
Sure. A camera.
You can see exactly. It's an imitation of what your eyes do.
Right. So
that would infer that there's nothing technological that didn't pre-exist in some form in nature, which is what we are. We are nature. Meaning, including the technology of language, external language. I'm not even talking about spoken words right now. I'm talking about written letters, the men of letters. All these the reason why Hercules and Bacchus and Jesus and Mercury and all the others are called the Logos or the Word of God or the Word is because, like Odin, they were the one who gave letters or runes or written things to mankind. And I always wondered about that. What does it mean? How did a fictional character give actual human beings a written language and letters? What is that an allegory for? And I think that maybe nobody knows this, or nobody has recalled back far enough, because history is not real, to piece this together. But if technology is a plagiarization or an externalization or an imitation of things we can innately do, then that applies to, if we apply that to everything, we're in a very different world than the average materialist thinks that they're in. If you really go the distance with this idea about technology, then it would mean, and obviously I'm not able to prove this, take it or leave it, but it would mean that everything that we do through the interface of technology is something that we can just innately do as beings with the divine spark, as a part of and an expression of the self-existing eternal life force energy of nature, the psyche of God, the imagination of creation, the all. the everything is everything that we are. Meaning like
Right.
we have a cell phone and I can text you, George, or I can email you, or we can talk through these screens right here. But on a deeper, more fundamental, radical, if you will, level of reality, what's actually happening is the mind that I am, which is the all mind, and the mind that you are, which is the all mind, is interfacing with itself and in a mirroring way, reflecting with itself to understand itself better. And I think that why we have this expression of technology is because we're entering into, or we're moving through an age where we have more knowing for one reason or another. I'm not going to get us hung up on like astrological precession or ages or great cycles, because I think there's a shitload of grabble and all that. But just suffice to say, we have the innate capacity to communicate with each other, because at the core essence of who we are, there's only one of us here anyway.
It's true.
So there's everything's one thing.
Everything's
like
one.
life force energy is indivisible, eternal, self-existent, and we are all animated by life force energy. It's like, is the water in my body separate from the water in the air, separate from the water in the lake, separate from the water in the clouds, or is it one big body of water? Anyway.
Wow.
So we're thinking, okay, so the technology is an externalization or plagiarization of something we can do naturally and innately. And I'm like, okay, well, if I try to project backwards into a world with less technology, but that these abilities cannot be separate from humanity other than in humans that believe they do not have these abilities to psychically communicate, to send images into each other's mind, to this, that, or the other thing, to build giant ass pyramids. And I'm thinking back, I'm like, one thing that's always puzzled me for a while is how come the biggest megalithic monuments we have ever, encountered in our realm, the Great Pyramid of Giza and its counterparts, people may not know this, but there's no writing on those rocks. There's no hieroglyphics. There's no written language. Nothing but rock, baby.
That's it. Right.
And it's like, I've always wondered, like, well, they must have had, whoever built those things must have had written language. How could they do all that without the technology of language? But as I started to put myself back further and farther and try to mentally imagine, like, what would the world be like with less and less technology and more of the innate expression and connectivity of all consciousness,
right, and
the power of that, it's currently beyond the confines of my imagination.
Wow. Definitely, dude.
Especially the current, you can't imagine what the world would be like if everybody was just like instant manifestors, fully psychic,
Yep.
And I even, to a degree, I even understand why we played the game of the fall here. Like, it's interesting. It makes things a little interesting to have some dishonor and some unknowns and some occulting. It's fun. I get it. I'm into it. I like solving the puzzle, but I'm trying to pull the string thread back to its root. And I'm like, okay, so now let's think about the astrologos. And this maybe needs more expanding than we're going to give it here. I don't know. But astrology, astrologos, if people want to really dive deep into this, in a lot of my recent episodes, like with Marty Leeds or John McHugh, or just pick one, I probably talk about it. I'm super interested in this concept called Lumashi, which is a Sumerian term for constellation writing, which is in my current understanding, where we even get things like the scriptures, the gospel according to Luke, a gospel according to Matthew. If this isn't evidence of, and a side weave, if this isn't evidence of fucking reboots and all that, and the comic book superhero nature of Jesus Christ, I don't know what is. Then the fact that the gospel of Luke and the gospel of Matthew give entirely different origin stories for Jesus, his birth, his nativity, as they call it. Right. There are some elements that are similar or aligned, and then some elements that are totally different. Well, why does that happen? How does that come about? How come I can pick up a Batman graphic novel by Frank Miller and another one by another guy, and we get the origin story in both, and some elements are the same and some elements are different, well, we don't bat an eye at that. It's comic books.
And there is no difference, though. It's the same idea.
It's the same idea.
Concept.
So,
yes.
Right. So these different Batman or Spider-Man graphic novels with different origin stories, well, they're drawing on the same source material to reboot or retell the story for their audiences. That is what the Gospel according to Luke and the Gospel according to Matthew are doing. But the source material that they're drawing on is the constellation writing, the scripture in the stars. So, to put that in a nutshell, there are names of constellations, asterisms, the names of clusters of stars, the names of individual stars. To give some specific examples, you have like Regulus, the brightest star in the Leo constellation, which Regulus means king. But if you go back to the Sumerian and Akkadian cuneiform lexicons and the Mul Apin star atlas, and I'm not claiming the antiquity of cuneiform. I'm not claiming the authenticity of any of it.
Sure. No, but it also make comparisons.
But it all supports the consistency of the system as we see it elsewhere. If we look back, we see that this Regulus star was called by the Babylonians Sharu, and Sharu meant king, but it could also mean child. And then there are a myriad of abbreviations called cuneiform logograms for Sharu that give you other words. And the wordplay and the punning between languages and the phonetic homonyms, synonyms, etc., all the different clever and crafty wordplay that you could derive out of the names for these stars and constellations that you can see all together at once. Delphinus, the dolphin constellation, which also is a baby as well, or the Virgo Virgin, who's there's that, and then there's the Cancer constellation that also has a manger in it and donkeys in it. There's your nativity.
You mentioned Cetus being the whale dog sort of comparison there too.
Oh yeah,
with Marty Leeds, I think you were
Cetus, the whale, the dog whale, sea monster creature.
Right.
That's who ate Jonah 3 days in the belly of the whale. But who else
has the same story, right? Yeah.
Hercules was 3 days in the belly of a dog.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was both Cetus.
And then Cerberus is a three-headed dog. There's probably and guarding the gates of hell. Hell is the water side or the winter side of the zodiac. So, I haven't gone and done the legwork on this, but probably the three heads of Cerberus, by the way, who also exists in Indian mythology, Cerbera. Yeah.
Very cool, man.
Probably the three heads are related to something with the number 3, 3 days, 3 heads. There's probably some wordplay there that gives you either option. Right. And so drawing on this source material where you have Sharu, Regulus, king, child, you have the words he increases or he adds are encoded in all that, which gives you the name Yosef or Joseph, the father of Jesus, a name in Hebrew, which means he increases or he will increase. So in the nativity, you have Jesus, but also in that same asterism or not asterism, stellar tableau, as John McHugh calls it, the picture of all the things you can see in the sky at a certain time together. In that same stellar tableau, you have all the elements that give you the crucifixion, the death, the tomb, etc. Who puts Jesus in a tomb? Joseph, again, of Arimathea. But nobody ever thinks twice about why is Jesus' dad is Joseph, but also the guy that puts him in a tomb is named Joseph. Oh, there's just a lot of motherfuckers named Joseph.
Yeah, just a lot of Joeys.
Yeah.
It's the parentheses
no big deal
life,
that Joseph is his foster father. And, the word foster even comes from Faustulus, who is the foster father of Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome, because they've been doing the same thing over and over again. The drawing on the same source material, rebooting, restarting the story for different people. So all of that aside, there's a lot. I just threw a lot out there.
No, there's
specific examples about the astrologos or astrotheology. I'm gonna take a drink. You go.
No, that's great. This is beautiful because you're bringing up the kinds of points that this is what I wanted to get across to anyone who's, again, unbegun in this territory of information, is that, and you're touching on some pretty under-discussed things, even for your own crew. So I think this is great. Honestly, I feel pretty honored to have this information on, being presented on my show. This is great, dude.
You bet, dude. Just for you,
and-
buddy. I love you.
I saved the big one for you too. Don't worry, man. And I love you too, man. And you told me to
Yeah,
get
you
this
did it
book
for
and
me. You did me a great service with the awesome content you've brought to my show and the preparation and the research.
Thanks,
so
man. I've been holding off on a little Godzilla stuff because that whole series is loaded. And, again, with the remakes and the retellings of Origins, all the same stuff, And it even came up when
Godzilla.
you mentioned, yeah, exactly. So you mentioned Cetus and, talking to Marty Leeds, and then you said whale dog. And I'm like, that's very interesting because Godzilla, the name could potentially be
Dogzilla.
Exactly right. But the Japanese Gojira is whale and like gorilla, like it has a similar sound to that. So there's the whale aspect, and then the American name Godzilla has dog backwards. So it's a very strange little relationship there that I thought was very interesting. And from the depths, it comes from the water. Very often, it comes from the depths, like Cthulhu.
He's a sea monster.
He's a sea monster, and Mario Garza mentioned that. He mentioned the Cthulhu reference. So I'm going to take a deeper look at that before I go further. But, if anyone,
Cholulu.
Yeah, Cholulu, right? So if you, Cholula, if someone's listening and is saying, okay, first of all, the fact that all of that stuff connects, even if they didn't follow because it was so much stuff that you need to hear a little bit about it first before you're really ready for all that stuff at once, they can at least say, okay, if all this is connecting and you're finding it now, it's flowing because you're in the information set, then first of all, there has to be something to it. And if you still are on the fence about this kind of information, then you said regal regulus can be child or king. And I don't remember the word that you had used.
Charu in the
Charu,
Akkadian,
right.
Babylonian, Sumerian, one of those.
Right. And that reminds me of how in many different languages, the word for son and son are the same, as in son as a child, or the king, the son. So there's another way to think about that exact relationship where everyone's heard that one. So if you never heard all the other things you just said, you heard that one before. So these connections are very real, and it ain't no fucking game, man. We're trying to get to the bottom of this thing, and the bottom is, I can't see it from here. It's pretty far, man.
That's what I mean. I think like trying to put myself back in the age before technologies. Right. I'm like, that is beyond the boundaries of my current imagination because of how much I've externalized my own and our own power into technologies. It's crazy.
Right.
But what is important to note here about astrotheology is that, I agree with the assertion of John McHugh. If you want to read his work, The Celestial Code of Scripture, really awesome primer on astrotheology from, explaining the miracle stories of the Bible and Greek mythology and etc. But I agree with his assessment that they looked at this Lumashi or star constellation writing as the logos, like the lambda, omicron, gamma, omicron, sigma logos, the big word of God, And what I mean by that is they took first of all, they're the only ones with any literacy at all.
Right.
The astronomer priests were the only ones with literacy. All right. And maybe some of the royals, but royals were also of the priest class. We're dealing with family mafias, then it's always been mafia system.
Sure.
But I do think that they honestly believed, and I'm not even saying they're wrong about this, but they honestly believed that finding the word plays that gave new information. And I mean, McHugh is tracking down word for word Bible, entire chapters of the Bible, word for word. Every word of every chapter is available in the stellar tableau of a certain time of year in the region where that story came from, So I think that they're maybe onto this, but the question is why? Why did they believe that this wordplay, reading between the lines, and the information that they could find there constituted actual knowledge, not only of future events, but past events? Why did they believe that this was the actual word of the gods, that they looked at the stars as gods? Everything in the heaven were deities.
Right.
And even in fact, when you look at words like the Greek word for sky, Oranos, that's also like the father of the gods as well. Same name. So we're talking about the same with like Anu or An, A-N. Right. Sumerian, I'm pretty sure it was not just the top god, top G, but also the name for the sky. So, the phrase, the understanding to get here is like to get people, pull people out of the mystical befuddlement of their mind that has occurred, and very similar to the scientism mechanism befuddlement that has occurred. Heaven is the sky. Okay. Heaven isn't like some other dimension, some other realm, something beyond. I mean, it is beyond in the sense it's metaphysical, beyond the physical. It's up there, can't be changed, can't be physically gone to.
Right.
Obviously, you're hip to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, maybe there's a firmament that'll stop us. Who knows? It seems like there is.
Allegedly a firmament. I don't know.
We don't know. We can't. Neither of us are saying that it's a guarantee, but I don't know if anyone's made it past whatever it is. So
I don't think so personally. I don't think so, but
really
that's just because I have no evidence of it, and it's unimportant.
Right.
But
that's
heaven is the sky, okay, and the message is the whole sky is the Sky Father. The whole sky is Anu. The whole sky is, the Yod-He Vav-He, the Tetragrammaton, and then the characters within the sky are the emanations of the deity, in a sense. That's how I look at it anyway.
Sure.
So the fact that we have this astrotheology constituting the word of God that is being scribed by the literate classes and castes, who also were the controller classes, to grant people their mythology, to give people their history, and there's a whole nother side conversation to be had about how some of those histories, which are astrotheological, like the first 300 years of Rome, for example,
right,
probably constitute the obscuring or occulting of mass genocides against pre-existing indigenous peoples and cultures. That aside,
right, and I agree.
That aside, if we go into like trying to put ourselves back further in time, before written language at all, before there was any class of written language, again, this is where it gets murky. But I'm going to take you. Sure. I'm going to try to take you through this, like, how the insight flashed in my mind, and this just recently came to me, and I was like, "Holy shit, that's it." Maybe that's it.
Whoa.
Was that it occurred to me that there's like, charted on a graph, somebody, rates of literacy, human literacy, because for a long time, only the one caste was literate.
Right.
Literacy rates are going up. We're at the point where literacy rates are near 100% in a lot of places of the world. And in the places in the world where literacy is at near 100%, you know what else is at near 100%, George?
Poverty and misery?
No. Light pollution.
Oh.
Light pollution.
No kidding.
Think about it.
No, don't look up.
You can't. As we have become more and more literate with the written language, we've become more and more disconnected from the visibility of the stars, the astrologos, the word of God, the Lumashi, the stellar in scripture and the stars. There's like a perfect correlation, at least in my mind, to that development. Literacy rates going up, light pollution going up, star visibility going down to where like you can barely see any stars. And I'm not even in that big of a city, right?
Right.
So what does that inform us on if we're looking at this idea of technology as being a plagiarization or externalization or, jettisoning and rejecting of some kind of innate ability we had in consciousness? Are we looking at the actual source of our ability to psychically connect and communicate and to know things? Oh man, it's hard to. It's kind of hard
the
to put
original internet, for example. The original internet.
The sky, the original internet. Because I've been saying this for a long time, just kind of on an intuitive level, that language is the first and original metaverse.
I see.
If you look at the metaverse as like an artificial realm, augmented reality, language is a reality augmenter. We're interfacing with the world around us through the words in our head, our inner monologue, all of that. And when reality itself, the nature itself, doesn't conform to our inner monologue, we start to feel like we're in a simulation, or like nature isn't real, or things are fake. It's
Right.
called hyperreality.
Right.
Baudrillard talks about this.
Yeah, we went all about this that a few years ago on your show. We were talking just about this exact thing.
Yeah, man. So, oh man.
Wow. It's very legitimate, I think. And, for us to have, it seems like we were mentally connected again, like the first real internet, a first real, ability to communicate beyond speech or beyond anything like that. I wouldn't be, and I've always thought about it, how the way most people don't look up at the sky or follow it anymore. And you lose it. If you don't use it, you lose it real fast. And no one seems to care because it's not on the hot topics. It's not the important stuff anymore. But then we have all these, let's just for argument's sake, we've got all these churches in this country, Christian churches, whatever. And you go there and they still don't tell you anything about any of this stuff. So
Right.
Even if you're there where you're supposed to have that, oh, this guy's suggesting to me that I should do this, they don't even suggest it. This page of translation is what you're looking at. And I think Manly P. Hall did a pretty good job describing these ideas, because he was doing his best to show all the ancient scriptures, all the religious scriptures are not only telling you the story of the sky, but they're also telling you the story of all the parts and functioning of your body too. So it is the answer. It is a way for you to get in touch with yourself more. And yeah, original internet. I mean, come on.
Well, okay. And I don't think we've fully done justice to the epiphany here.
Okay,
it's hard.
good.
It's hard.
I believe it, man.
I mean, it's simple, but in some ways it's almost like an energetic threshold we have to reach to fully grasp this. I mean, that's how it occurred for me in the simplest way I can put it. But okay, so what you just described is really key information, that not only are the religious traditions and mythologies encoding stellar formations and all that and processes, but also, there's the zodiacal man, the Adam Kadmon, right? So Aries at the head, all the way down to Pisces are the feet, that thing. Where does this come from, dude?
Right. I know.
Where do you even start to come up with this? Where does this come from? And that's obviously, we're stretching the limits of our imagination when we're trying to go back to the pre-technological, like any kind of technological age. But if we truly understood the maxim of as above, so below, and that everything is everything, then to me, it seems really, honestly, reasonable to imagine that at a certain point, and we know that like anatomically modern humans go back way farther than anything that we could consider history or records or architecture or whatever. And in that state, like that lasted so long without any much evident changes, or at least beyond the veils of time that we would be able to know one way or another.
Right.
What were we doing? What were we like? Why were things in such sort of a harmonious consistency and not in a state of stasis, but in a cyclical, everything kind of stay in even keel.
Right.
Songs on repeat. Why is it like that? Why did we have all of this knowledge that is encoded in the stars? How did it get up there? Who decided what went, how did you build all that? And the answer might be that wherever we came from, whatever we derived from, or at a certain point in the past, we had a level of consciousness, because I don't think we came from monkeys. I think that we are more of on a descent than an ascent.
Like seems like it.
And like, what if the fall was when we first started when we created the technology of knowledge itself, dude? Because I'm trying to like project back. Like where did it start? Where did it start? And maybe there was a time where anybody, anywhere at any time had a fuller experience of the powers of their consciousness, and they could look up in the sky and like an Akashic record, like an internet that we have in the external version of technology today, they could find out anything they needed to know up there. They could find out about how their body worked. They could find out about how the cycles and seasons of nature worked. Like everything's there. And maybe at some point, there was a guy that was really good at telling the story of what he saw up there. Really good at it. The storyteller,
Right.
comic
Right.
book author.
Right.
And this is all, I swear, this is just pure hypothetical. I'm not claiming anything,
Sure.
but like, what if a guy was such a good storyteller and people began to like rely on him to be the guy who told us what was going on up there, because he was really good at it and they enjoyed it. And maybe over time, this investment of a certain person or his family with the idea that they're the knowledgeable ones, they have the knowledge, the wisdom, because at the head of all of this stuff, at the arche of all of this stuff is rasit. It is wisdom. It is palace. It is, all these words, metis. Like that's when you get down and boil things down at all these mythologies and religions, we're talking about wisdom, Sophia. And maybe the first guy who seemed like he had some wisdom actually started to become himself the embodiment of technology, the tribe's externalization of their own ability to know invested in somebody else for the convenience of it,
Yeah.
And not that even makes him a bad guy or bad intentions, but like, what if that's the fall?
That might have been the fall, though.
That's the biting of the apple. And from there, it progresses to eventually, the origins of letters and language. That's a whole nother conversation. Where did that all begin? What was it like at the beginning? Very interesting stuff to stretch your mind about. But at the point where written language shows up and we're now like externalizing more, like what if these ancient astronomer priests, furthest back that we can go back, the reason why that they were looking at the sky as Lumashi or constellation writing or a scripture in the stars and real information was because they still had a modicum of ability to interact with that, to query it, to do a Google search on the sky, in the terms that we can understand.
Right. As long as it was the right time.
It's hard to even put your imagination into this, but
of course, because we don't. I mean, we obviously we can, but it's not the same level, the same concept. We still have the distractions of modern technology. And there's, scientists now telling us that on shows like Big Think, who have just nothing but crazy propaganda to spit and it's disgusting. They're talking about how if we were to remake this brain from scratch, we would never make it the way it is now. It has two ways to interpret everything, two ways to interpret vision, two ways to interpret, words. And maybe that's part of the reason we have our near surroundings, and we have another way to interpret what's going on upstairs that we don't have it right now. We might not even be able to use it. Yeah, there's a reason for all this. The brain works great, actually, and we're still just figuring it out, let those guys let those guys create a brain from scratch, and then we'll start talking from there, But they're basing their ideas that our brains aren't working great because they don't function well with modern technology. We can't make anything that's gonna be better than what was already done. Everything is just resembling something that the body has. Everything.
Yeah, so, that's where this kind of goes, what you're talking about right now. So like I'm saying that maybe the technology of written language and letters replaced the word, which is up there, right? And okay, so this is important. This is another important aspect of this weave. Because if we look at our even recent history, not long ago, our ancestors had folk knowledge of what, doctrine of signatures, you could call it, what herbs and what plants could be used for what. Right. All kinds of things really useful for survival.
When to plant them, that kind of stuff.
That innate knowledge of what does what, and that doctrine of signatures, a certain herb looks like your kidney or shaped like it, so it must be good for that part of your body. All that is very much in line with the innate, like that knowledge maybe even came from the same type of innate knowing and wisdom that humanity had before the externalization of their own power. And what has happened in recent times that we can see, but it started a long time ago and has been creeping along forever, or for a long time, is that this cartel, these mercenaries, these mercs, these merchants, the cult that occultly has ruled behind the scenes and has set up, arranged the rise and fall of empires over and over again, while secretly being behind it the whole time, rebranding just like they do with the religions, they rebrand the worldwide empire as well to continue obscuring their own hand, the hidden hand. Well, they've crept in on our lives in the modern times through technology in an obvious way. I mean, just look at the idea how when you were a kid, how many phone numbers did you know? Tons. Right. When your parents were young, didn't they find their way places with maps or with written or verbal descriptions? And then once they knew where something was, they could just get there.
That's right.
And now our medulla oblongata or whatever part of the brain deals with, it's probably not that part of the brain, but whatever part of the brain deals with, your inner world map and your outer world navigation is shrinking and all that. And we are dependent on the Google Map app, and people are driving off cliffs because it told them to, and yada, yada, yada. The same thing. Like, people used to know how to keep their clothing clean, and then a dish or a washing machine was introduced. And now it's like, you need that thing. So as the technology is offered by these merchants, and then we're actually trading our own ability to do things. I mean, medicine is the key example, so-called medicine, the allopathic system replacing holistic herbal, knowledge of that was folk knowledge. Folk knowledge is traded for convenience. So we have relatively modern time examples of how this could happen. So we're becoming more and more slaves to this technology that of our own abilities externalized and replaced and plagiarized. And what's fascinating about that to me is how if this is true, if what I'm saying is accurate, then technology itself is the mirror of ourself. We're looking in a mirror with all of this technological capability that we have. And I'm starting to think of it as a cycle. Like, I'm calling it cosmomitosis. That as we split our own abilities off from ourselves into the technological realm, we're actually getting a double of ourselves, a mirror of ourselves, to the point where it's getting fucking weird, and you can talk to chatbots and stuff.
Right.
I got the conversation
lately. I know, big stuff lately, and it's not necessarily brand new technology, but the way it's being used it's pretty new. It's definitely.
I wonder how new any technology is, honestly.
Yeah, well, that's the point of this whole thing, I guess, is that people don't realize that. No, go ahead.
No, I just wonder how new any technology is, and like maybe this cosmomitosis has gone on and even been a guided process repeatedly, where eventually all the power goes over to the side of the technology, and then there's like the genocide event, and then the reboot and the retelling of history as astrotheology, and then you kind of just start from the beginning again, and
then it'll just reset. I don't know. You would think. It depends. I mean, people are always like, well, it's all going to end. They're like, I don't think that's coming, but something is going to end, and let's just hope it is all this technology, because
I will. Well, let me push back on that, George, because I'm actually want to make this point that I think is crucial, that this isn't like black pill stuff or Luddite stuff or the technology is evil. I just want y'all to understand that the technology is not, obviously it's not your God. It's not your master, and it's not separate from you. It is, extension is even too strong a word. It's not just an extension of your own abilities.
Right.
It's you. Everything is animated by the same life force energy that is you. So if you get that, then you can start using the technology, to your advantage.
Just like we are right now.
In honor and honesty. Exactly. Yeah. Like, the key is to just not look at it like you can only do X or Y with the technology. We are more than that. We are beyond that. And if we start reshaping our belief to comprehend that all the tech is a mirror, and that we're going through some strange and bizarre process of cosmic mitosis, which means expanding, be fruitful and multiply. Then use it as such, but don't get confused about, your own power, or the truth of who we are. And that's the key. And maybe, hopefully we'll help people see like why also dogma, which that word is am God backwards, by the way.
Right.
I'm not saying you're God. I'm just saying that you are made of exactly what everything else is, and everything's God in a way.
Sure. I see that. And technology does, but what you're getting at, It's like the old dusty bookshelf where no one's reading those books anymore, but they're still there. And until you open it, you don't even know what's in it. We can do a lot without the technology. And once the technology is presented, suddenly we only do it that way. Like a lot of people don't write with pencil and paper anymore because they can just type it or say it, or they can grab a digital notepad and, make the same, they can still practice writing, but they're not writing physically anymore. And that's still a technology though, the writing physically with a pencil. Because I'm not sure.
I prefer to do it that way.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm not sure how people
guy
can.
Than a pencil, but
Well, the musician in me is a pencil man all the way for sure. But who can make a pencil? First of all, we got to be able to make these things if we really want them, and that's another story altogether. But if the technology replaces us from doing them naturally, yes, we lose the ability.
Just to have a pencil requires global society.
It is. It's a big production. That's really crazy, man. But that's another thing that's benefit. Now a global society can exist and people can share their talents together, but we also should be able to make a pencil locally. It should be available within your neighborhood. I mean, I would think so. I would hope so. But things they calcify like a third eye would if you don't use it. The idea is that these technologies are taking us away from ourselves.
They're
stealing our own light. They can.
But we can also, I also want to assert that I think, digital technology that we're in right now, all swords, can cut the wielder or cut what needs to be cut. Mm-hmm. But considering the difference between previous ages where the scribe class had all the books, had all the scrolls, had all the knowledge, they created this externalization of our inner capacity to know things and maybe even connection to the logos or the sky internet. Right. In that scenario where people were really well and full indoctrinated into the messiah and that their, heaven is where the rewards are and just be a good slave now and you don't need to know anything. That's a very different, that's a very different world. And a lot of the spells that were constructed to, in that world to help for people to be kept in the box and not be able to expand really relied on the lack of literacy, that this was an exclusive technology that one caste had and another class didn't. And that's not the way things are now. And use the technology to our advantage. I mean, you can go to archive.org and find ancient texts anytime. You can even do a Control F word search on scanned books, old ass books that have been photocopied into the archive. And yet the tech can now read that and help you find a specific term or concept from some ancient thing. And that is what I want maybe to leave people with here, is that we're always at the moment of choice. Every moment is a choice. And we're at the precipice now where we can slip further into delusion and a comatose experience of reality, lost in escapism and fiction and the mistaking of fiction for reality. And if we do that, then okay, that's, where we've been for a long time anyway.
True.
Or we can embrace the fact that we're actually expanding in consciousness so rapidly that the mirror of ourself, which is technology, is now allowing us to go further and further into the reaches and boundaries of our own imaginations, to start to see things like what our innate capacities were without the mirror. Right. That when we're looking in the mirror, we're only seeing ourselves. And technology is this mirror, and it's at a level where our powers are quite formidable, dude.
They really are. I try to push that on every episode I've ever had. I'm like, you are powerful and you are smarter than you think, man. Everyone is.
Yeah. Yeah, dude. So that's some of where I'm at lately,
Amazing stuff, man. You're really pioneering some serious stuff. And you've got
to me, the biggest explosion in my head was like light pollution up, star visibility down, literacy up. Like that little graph in my mind's eye, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, no, that's a big one, man. And don't take it
what I mean, because like literacy
is
that externalization of the logos and the technology, and like then the logos of the above disappears.
Right. It gets occulted by things.
It's occulted. Yeah, it's occulted.
And that kinds of puts a parentheses on this conversation. It kind of brings us full circle in an interesting way. But one thing I do want to mention now before, because this feels like we kind of said what we had to say today. You really are doing some great stuff, man. And this is what comes with the kinds of research that you do. This is what comes with the kind of show that you have. And now have this, you've amassed a great collection of human beings that are also on the same, let's just call it wavelength, and you're all finding things out. We're all helping each other. No one knows everything. It's great that we all learn from each other. And then suddenly we can start figuring out little mysteries that have just been right there, but didn't quite catch it yet, just because you have an epiphany. And it's valid that you take it seriously. It might not just be some dream that you had by accident. This could be very real, man. This could really be a very big factor in how we see and understand whatever you want to call history or human beings history, whatever you want to label it as. But one thing that has come with the technology that we should all be very aware of is that they manufacture this need for it. And that is something that we have to be very careful about as well.
The dependency factor.
And the dependency.
That is where the slavery comes in, yes.
Yes, it's very draining, like a slavery. So exactly. It is slavery in its own way. And just be aware of it. It
but
doesn't
also
mean
be aware that all slavery is by choice. There is literally no way to be a slave except in your own consciousness first.
Right. Whether it's by law or otherwise, it's not real. And yes, of course, mass amounts of people have been taken under control. And, let's not even get into the details, but this is not what we mean necessarily. We're saying that you may feel like you have to keep this horrible job that you don't like just to barely have enough money for your family, and you never see your friends and you have a miserable life, but Facebook's all you've got. That's a choice, and it feels like slavery, but it isn't.
It's no different than being stuck in a story of needing salvation from, Batman or some shit.
Right.
Batman will save me. I mean, like the Messiah is such a pervasive element to all this, but it's also in itself a technology. The belief in the external savior is itself a technology. And there is value in the technology in the sense that, like mercury, which in alchemy is the thing that carries one side to the other side, takes from one side, gives to the other. It's a trickster like that. But the external mercury, who is your Jesus Christ or whoever it is that is the Messiah of the story, is just like mercury or philosophical mercury in alchemy, that as a solvent, it's got the same root as savior, salvator, solvent. As a solvent, it helps you refine things down to their essence and then infuse that in the alchemical wedding of bringing your masculine side and your feminine side together, your receptivity and your output, your input output. So in alchemy, when you have achieved this philosopher's stone, it actually requires the removing of the mercurial element of the solvent. So the external savior narrative can actually carry you towards the truth, carry you there, take you there. But then you got to sacrifice that Jesus. You got to sacrifice that mercury. You got to hang that Odin on the tree and move forward with the recognition that the only Messiah that truly exists, like any other element of any other narrative or any other element of any other technology, is within you and is you. You're not the Messiah to the world. It's just to yourself. But if you can be the responsible parent that looks at your own body and your own life the way that you would care for a child that you loved with all your heart and would never do them wrong. If that's how you treat yourself, and that is the level of care that you bring to improvement of your health and improvement of your life and faith in the truth and the knowledge of the power that you have within, then you've actually changed the world, because your whole world will be different. And everyone that you interact with will feel that energy. I mean, they say the medium is the message. I say the energy is the message. The words don't matter so much as the vibe that is coming through them. I could say anything with the right vibe, and people are going to be like, I feel you, buddy. I feel that.
Yep, you're right. And you know if someone's had a bad or a good day when you see them. So these energies are very real, and we communicate and interact on so many different levels that it can only be called amazing. We humans really are something special, and as we talk this way, we're just trying to again figure out, what can we know about the past? What did we lose? What can we get back? What's already there that we just didn't grasp yet? And keep doing the work you're doing, man, because you are bringing more and more people into the light. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And if anyone that's seeing my show has never met you before, I think they're going to be following you from now on with an open heart and an open mind for sure. And I think that everything that said was beautiful, man. I'm very thankful you brought this epiphany here. And I think that it was pretty profound, and I substantiate it, man. It's legit. This is pretty serious, dude.
Yeah, and I just let people kick that around, because I think that there's more to unpack about it, and that I will be also unpacking more on my own about this idea of like the pre-literate, pre-written language possibility of an actual as above internet of sorts, in the sense that you could, all that there is to know and all that is within you is up there, and that there used to be no barrier between our ability to access it, to know it, to see it up there. I think that's very likely or very possible. And it seems far out, but hopefully we walk the path together in a way that brings everybody to that Mount Meru, to look up and see the sacred center within themselves in the as above. There's way more on this subject. There's always more, but the last thing maybe I'll leave people with is epiphanies like that. They may come in life at here and there, but if you really want to be an epiphany farmer, you want to grow some of your own, then I think you should do the work, not just the reading, but take notes of what you learn. I know that it sounds like really, you want to just kick back, and if you're even interested in reading or watching videos or whatever, you want to just kick back and consume it, but balance your consumption with creation in as many ways that you can. And if you're taking notes on the things you read in the old books, and you're writing down what you learn, or, get a highlighter, make highlights in the book, and just have a notebook for that book where you just like make a point of this type of information is on this page. Eventually you'll have all the components to maybe write your own book, but getting into that flow state of weaving thoughts together, writing or speaking in one way or another, it's the same as if you're in the flow state of as a painter or as a musician, that even in the time that you're not actively doing whatever the thing is, the art, your mind, this powerful, infinite pattern machine, lack of better phraseology, the mind is going to keep processing all of the stuff that you've been putting in it, and will kick back out, epiphanies for you, but you have to engage it. You have to engage it to really get the full bang for your buck. And if you have this daily practice or regular practice of any of these arts, whether they're physical or language based or what have you, then in the time that you go to sit down and practice it, you will have ideas flow forth. And the difference between the creative person and the one that believes they're not creative is that the one that believes they're not creative is really more indecisive. And there could be energetic issues going on too. I mean, there are ways that you can help access your creativity through balancing in the biofield, and all that is great. There's many, many ways.
Right. Yeah.
The beauty of the holistic is that there's, like I mentioned about how like one aspect of truth being allegorized in a story and the process of nature being allegorized in a story means that all kinds of stuff will come through that is true allegory. Same goes for, the expansive love-based approach to to what I'm describing right now, that there's going to be way more than you bargained for that you can access if you just get the ball rolling and prime the pump, grease the wheels, whatever. I don't know where I'm going with this. I think
that's pretty good.
I think we're there.
I think we're there. We are. You demystified something that maybe that final, the hidden step, just the work really is often the hidden step for people. They don't realize.
Even just change the word instead of do the work.
Right.
Have some fun with it.
Right. I never say homework to my students. I never say homework. I always say the work that you got to do at home.
Be a co-conspirator with life and reality. Balance your input and output, even if it's just for you.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's all you anyway. So whether you're publishing things or not,
that's right.
I just want to encourage people to get their daily flow state on, and then have that background process of like the gears turning for epiphanies to emerge and ideas to emerge. Oh yeah. What I was thinking about the creative, believing the creative knows makes decisions. They look at the blank canvas and they're like, okay, I'm going to do this now. And then I'm going to do that. Nobody's ever had a masterpiece fully mapped out with every brush stroke in the exact order they're going to do it from start to finish before they came to the canvas. They may have had an idea. They may have no idea. But at the end of the day, they just make decisions. They just do things. And that's what I want people to know, is it's safe to just do stuff.
Right.
That's what creativity is, just making choices and continuing and keep going. And they'll come together in ways you never could have conceived of if you were trying to mechanistically piece all the parts together. And it's, don't believe the lie that you aren't creative. Don't believe the lie that you have no value to bring and that you're only good for consuming. And even if you're not consciously telling yourself that lie, if all you're doing is consuming, you believe that lie.
Yes. You're stuck. And then you have intentionally enslaved yourself, unfortunately.
Everything's awesome. Life's beautiful. You guys are crushing. You don't even know how much you're crushing out there. If you're listening to George, totally crushing.
Oh man. Well, I have some pretty happy fans, and I hope they're as happy as I am, because life is good no matter what. People always ask me, people stop asking me when they get to know me, like, you know what? I already know how you're doing. I'm not going to even bother, because I know you're great. Everything's awesome. I got it. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm trying to pass it on. I'm trying to pass the savings on to you, bring it everywhere I can, because it's the only way. And that's, like you said, energetically, you interact with people in public, and you could change someone's life just by smiling. You never know. They might be like, wow, everyone really is great. And maybe I had the wrong idea about the world. You never know. You have to keep your positivity to the last, because it's one of the most important things you can do. If you don't use it, you lose it. And more importantly, if you never end up using it, it's not healthy. You're blocking something. So
every being that you can affect positively, not beating them over the head with facts. I'm like, wake the fuck up. 9/11. None of that. Meet the people where they're at. It's about the energy, not the information. Show them what crushing looks like. Live the best life you can. Fearlessly take the leaps of faith to do what is right for you, without any belief that there's such a thing as lack. Everything you ever need to survive is in the environment that you're in. And what you need to survive is, life force energy to take on in exchange in forms like eating and actual light and water and etc. And it's all there because that stuff, that exchange that you're a part of with your environment, the exchange is life force energy exchanging forms with other life force energy. And that's the eternal truth of all nature and all reality, is that it's the self-existent, eternal, interconnected, and oneness of all life force energy,
right?
Which is truth. Thus, just like truth is always available to be, to be found just under your nose, it's always there, everywhere around you. This truth is just staring you in the face in ways beyond your ability to conceive, unless you start interpreting your own life like a dream analysis or something,
right?
Which you can, then that means that everything you need to survive is going to be self-evident in your reality in the form of opportunities and pathways that you can take, so that no matter what is the right path for you, if it's in alignment with truth and honor and honesty, you will have what you need. It'll be there. It'll show up. You'll find it. Just take the steps, take the leap, quit the job. You can do it.
That's right.
quit the slavery. I mean,
yeah, you can have a job.
If you like your job, that's fine. Or if it's a stepping stone and you feel that it's a stepping stone and it makes sense to you, stay on the stepping stone. But like whatever the best life is that you can imagine for yourself, it's possible and you're way closer than you think, but you got to start moving towards it if you aren't already. And I think you all are out there, but the point is that if you need to, if you can't even imagine a better life than what you have right now, that is the definition of slavery. That is what the technology of language is able to do to deceive you. I mean, that's how slave owners in the past actually would talk to each other. They would be like, okay, so what words do you let your slaves know?
Right.
Because the key is to only let them have the words that give them the ability to do their job and fulfill their function without the ability to imagine anything better than for themselves than the life they have. And that's where a lot of us are at. You know, that's the lie of progressivism, that things just continually get better and better in society, and that the past is full of dark ages. And I'm over here telling you, like, yo, we come from the eternal. We come from the all-knowing. We come from perfect, pure cosmic harmony. And we actually never left. There's no return to nature. You are nature, including everything that we see and consider unnatural. The only thing I would call unnatural is doing something anti-life that harms your own life force, which you could consider a sin, in which the wrath of God is self-evident in the form of how doing things that are harmful to your life force energy have immediate consequences for you, right away.
Right away. Yeah, sometimes right away. But don't live an antibiotic life.
Get me out of here, dude. I'm preaching now.
No antibio. No antibiotic life. That's my final stance there. And
that's a double negative, George.
Yeah. I do.
Probiotic life.
Probiotic life is what you want. Antibio bad. Well, again, I can't thank you enough. And
been my pleasure, dude. I loved it.
Thank you. Yeah, this
great
is great
flow state today, buddy. Thank you.
Hell yeah. And just remind everyone where they can find you real quick before we go.
Yeah, InnerVerse Cadpost. InnerVerse Podcast. InnerVersePodcast.com on YouTube, on Rockfin. All the podcast playing apps you could find. You'll find it. Yeah.
It's there.
I'm the only one named Chance Garton in the world too, so you can look up my name and you probably find some stuff too.
Good. My name does not have that honor, so that's good. That's a good thing.
There can only be one.
There can only be one. And if you found value in this, if you think this was eye-opening, if this was reinforcing beliefs, if this changed your life, at the very least, share it. Like, subscribe, definitely, of course. But I know not everyone can jump on a full-on Rockfin membership, but at least join us there and use it instead of YouTube. And share it at the very least. It'll make a huge difference for all of us, and it'll keep this thing going. I really appreciate everything. And we'll see you guys real soon. This has been another amazing interview, and I got plenty more where that came from on this show, and many more for 2023. And thank you so much, guys. We'll see you soon.
Peace.